At Miranda's pet shop, a puppy is born with a red mark on its forehead that is different from its siblings. But what no one expected was that this small difference could determine its fate of being abandoned. As soon as she saw the poor little dog, Miranda was instantly annoyed and spiteful. "This one is worthless," she declared coldly, already considering the quickest way to get rid of it. Anything less than perfection had no place in her elite breeding program. The tiny puppy wiggled next to Luna, its mother, who instinctively nudged it closer. Miranda's sharp eyes scanned the rest of the litter. 8 perfect puppies, each with perfect spots, their fur shining in the soft light. A flicker of satisfaction crossed her face, but it quickly disappeared as her attention returned to the black puppy. "It's defective," she muttered. "We can throw it away." She said it in a cold, unthinking voice. Rachel, a young assistant standing nearby, stiffened at the sound. The black puppy squirmed, its tiny cries barely audible over the hum of the cage's ventilation system. "She's just a puppy, ma'am. She's healthy. Just looks a little different," Rachel said hesitantly, stepping forward. Her hands fidgeted nervously, clutching the hem of her coat. Miranda spun around, eyes narrowing. "Different doesn't sell," she snapped, her tone harsh. She gestured to the row of shiny, perfect puppies beside Luna. "That's what people pay for, not this. This floor." Rachel glanced down at the black puppy, its small body curled up in the old blankets, as if she could sense the rejection in Miranda's voice. Luna, sensing the tension, nudged the puppy with her nose, letting out a low growl. Miranda's lip curled in irritation. The tension was interrupted by the shrill ring of Miranda's phone. She answered briskly, her voice shifting to a veneer of politeness. It was Sophia, her old friend, chatting about her twin son's upcoming birthday. The boys, Logan and Mason, had been begging for a dog, specifically a German shepherd. "They're driving me crazy about it," Sophia said cheerfully. "I thought of you, of course. Could you sell me one of your pups?" Miranda's eyes flicked to the black puppy, which was now huddled beneath Luna's paw. A calculating glint entered her gaze. "Actually, I have just the thing. I'll bring it over as a gift. No charge," she said smoothly. Hearing this, Rachel spoke up, her voice steadier now. "That could work. It saves the kennel some space, and the puppy gets a home." Miranda shot her a sharp look, but didn't argue. "Fine," she said curtly, turning back to Rachel. "Separate it from the mother. Do it now." Rachel hesitated. She knelt by Luna, who growled softly, her body tense as she shielded the black puppy with her large frame. Luna's eyes, wide and pleading, locked onto Rachel's, silently begging her not to take the pup. Rachel's hands shook as she reached out, carefully prying the small body away. Luna barked sharply, her teeth snapping at the bars of the kennel as Rachel stood with the puppy cradled in her arms. The pup trembled against her chest, letting out soft, pitiful whimpers. Rachel carried it to the front of the kennel, where Mr. Sam, the driver, waited with a crate. He took the puppy wordlessly and secured it inside. Luna's frantic barking echoed through the kennel as the truck pulled away, carrying the black pup out of sight. That afternoon, Miranda arrived at Sophia's house. The black puppy, now trembling with exhaustion and fear, was placed on the lawn. Logan and Mason squealed in delight, running toward it. "They'll toughen it up," Miranda said dismissively. "Kids will be kids." The boys' laughter filled the house as they played with him. They raced through the yard, tossing a ball for Shadow to chase. But soon, their games became rougher. Shadow's hesitant steps and whimpers went unnoticed as Logan and Mason treated him less like a pet and more like a living toy. Their games escalated quickly. Logan thought it would be funny to toss Shadow into the air to see if he could land on his feet. Mason laughed as Shadow hit the ground awkwardly, yelping in pain. Months passed, and Shadow grew thinner and weaker. One afternoon, their antics went too far. Logan grabbed Shadow by the scruff of his neck and yanked him off the ground while Mason pressed his weight down on the dog's back. Shadow, overwhelmed by pain and fear, snapped. His tiny jaws closed on Mason's arm, drawing blood. Mason screamed, and Logan retaliated by swinging his fist at Shadow's head. But Shadow, desperate and cornered, bit Logan's hand in defense. Chaos erupted. Mason cried as his mother, Sophia, rushed into the yard. She froze at the sight of her bleeding children and the trembling dog. Her face hardened. Without hesitation, she yelled for the gardener to get rid of that dog. Shadow, sensing danger, bolted. The front gate stood slightly ajar, and he slipped through it, running as fast as his injured legs would carry him. His heart pounded with fear, his body ached, but he kept running, desperate to escape the nightmare that had become his life. Shadow limped through the empty streets of a desolate village, his thin frame barely holding together. His fur was matted with dirt and dried blood, a visible reminder of the mistreatment he had endured. Each step sent a sharp pain through his injured leg, but he pressed on, instinct driving him toward survival. His breath was shallow, his movements slow, and eventually his body gave out. Shadow collapsed next to an abandoned shack, too weak to continue. From the corner of his eye, Shadow noticed a figure approaching, a man, disheveled and worn, carrying a makeshift sack over his shoulder. Elliot had spent years wandering these forgotten places, a man cast aside by life. Once a skilled dog trainer for the military, he now survived by scavenging and doing odd jobs in this ghost of a town. Elliot stopped when he saw the dog, his instincts as a trainer kicking in immediately. He knelt slowly, observing the animal's gaunt frame and wary eyes. It was clear this dog had suffered. Every scar on its body told a story of betrayal. Elliot spoke softly, his voice low and steady, avoiding any sudden movements. "Hey, buddy, you're in rough shape, huh?" His words were meaningless to Shadow, but the tone was disarming. Still, Shadow didn't move. The memory of hands that had struck him, voices that had yelled, left him frozen with mistrust. Elliot reached into his sack, pulling out a small bottle of water. Spotting a rusted pipe nearby, he let a thin stream of water flow into the dirt, forming a small puddle. Then, he backed away, giving the dog space. Shadow hesitated, his parched throat burning with thirst. He edged forward cautiously, his nose twitching at the scent of water. When he finally lapped at the puddle, Elliot remained motionless, allowing the dog to feel in control. This was how trust was built, slowly, deliberately, without force. After a few moments, Elliot gently moved closer. The dog flinched but didn't run. "It's okay. I'm not here to hurt you," Elliot murmured, his hand extended, palm up. Shadow's ears twitched at the calm voice, and his tail gave the faintest flicker, though it quickly stilled. Once Shadow finished drinking, Elliot inspected the dog more closely. He noticed the deep gash on its leg and the raw patches on its paws. Reaching into his sack again, he pulled out a torn shirt and carefully tore it into strips. Elliot warned softly as he began cleaning the wound with some of the remaining water. Shadow whimpered, but didn't pull away. Elliot worked quickly, his hands steady despite his rough exterior. Years of training had taught him how to deal with injured animals, and his touch was firm but gentle. The bandaging complete, Elliot sat back and sighed, wiping sweat from his brow. He rummaged through his sack one last time and pulled out a crust of bread. Breaking it into pieces, he laid them on the ground a few feet away from Shadow. "It's not much, but it's better than nothing," he said. The dog sniffed the air and inched closer, his hunger overpowering his fear. Elliot watched as Shadow devoured the bread, a small smile forming on his lips. "You're a fighter. I can see that," he said quietly. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Elliot settled against the wall of the shack, his sack serving as a makeshift pillow. Shadow lay a few feet away, still cautious, but no longer trembling. The man looked at the dog and saw a reflection of his own life, abandoned, wounded, but not yet broken. "Guess we're both outcasts, huh?" Elliot said, more to himself than the dog. Shadow's ears perked up slightly at the sound of the man's voice, and for the first time, his body relaxed just a little. By the time the stars dotted the night sky, Shadow had inched closer, his head resting on his paws, but facing Elliot. The man extended his hand again, this time allowing it to hover in the air. Slowly, hesitantly, Shadow moved his nose forward and touched it to Elliot's fingers. It was a tentative connection, but it was enough. In that moment, Elliot and Shadow became more than strangers. They became companions, united by their shared pain and the faint hope of something better. Elliot's life with Shadow started in a rundown, abandoned house on the edge of a forgotten town. The place barely kept out the cold, but to them, it was a refuge. Elliot gathered scraps from odd jobs, sometimes earning just enough for bread or a can of soup. No matter how little he had, Shadow always ate first. If the meal was small, Elliot would watch Shadow eat with a smile, sipping on water to calm his own hunger. Shadow, in return, stayed close, his dark eyes always watching, his loyalty unshakable. Elliot knew Shadow needed more than food. With a careful hand, he began training the dog, drawing from years of experience as a former military dog handler. At first, Shadow hesitated, his spirit still scarred from past mistreatment, but Elliot's steady encouragement broke through the fear. Slowly, Shadow began responding to commands, sitting, staying, and even retrieving objects with precision. Elliot didn't just teach survival skills, he taught Shadow to trust again. Every small victory brought a flicker of joy to their bleak world. Nights were the hardest. The silence of the empty house was broken only by the wind rattling through broken windows. Elliot often sat by the weak glow of a candle, Shadow curled at his feet. It was during these quiet hours that Elliot talked, his voice low and rough, telling Shadow things he hadn't said aloud in years. He spoke of Lisa, his ex-wife, who had left him for a wealthier man, taking their daughter Diana with her. He told Shadow about selling his house to pay for what he thought was Diana's medical treatment, only to find out later it had been a lie. "They're gone, buddy," he'd say, running a hand over Shadow's thick fur. "But you're here. You're all I got." Shadow seemed to understand. He'd lift his head and press it against Elliot's knee, his eyes shining with quiet empathy. Over time, Elliot stopped seeing Shadow as just a dog. To him, Shadow was a companion, a protector, and a reason to keep going. Shadow, once discarded and broken, now stood tall and proud, reflecting the strength and resilience Elliot was slowly rediscovering in himself. Their bond deepened with each passing day. Shadow learned to sense Elliot's moods, nuzzling him when his thoughts grew too heavy. And Elliot found comfort in the rhythm of their shared life, in the simple act of waking up each morning to Shadow's warm presence. They didn't have much, but they had each other, and for the first time in years, that felt like enough. The day started like any other for Elliot, wandering aimlessly along the empty road, his mind clouded by the haze of cheap vodka. Shadow trotted faithfully by his side, his dark coat shimmering under the midday sun. The stillness of the day shattered suddenly when a car swerved sharply, its tires screeching on the asphalt. The impact was brutal. Elliot was thrown to the ground, his limp body crumpled on the roadside. Shadow barked frantically, running circles around Elliot's motionless frame. The dog nudged his owner with his nose, his paws scratching at Elliot's chest as if urging him to get up. Elliot didn't move. Shadow whimpered, his cries sharp and desperate, but no one seemed to respond until the wail of an approaching ambulance pierced the air. Paramedics rushed in, lifting Elliot onto a stretcher. Shadow lunged toward the stretcher, trying to follow, but the medics quickly blocked him out. The ambulance doors slammed shut, leaving Shadow on the road, howling at the disappearing vehicle. For hours, Shadow stayed at the accident site, pacing back and forth, his eyes locked on the horizon. Hunger gnawed at his belly and thirst parched his throat, but the loyal dog refused to leave. He barked at passing cars, his sharp cries echoing across the quiet stretch of road. Drivers began to notice the lone dog, his thin body trembling with exhaustion. Some stopped, leaving scraps of food and water on the roadside. Shadow would wait until the strangers left before cautiously approaching to eat. Even as night fell, he remained under the dim glow of the streetlights, waiting for a sign. Days turned into nights, and Shadow's vigil continued. His thin frame grew weaker, but his resolve remained unbroken. Then, as the third day broke, the unmistakable sound of an ambulance passing by jolted him to life. Shadow's ears perked up, his body tensed, and without hesitation, he bolted after the vehicle, his claws scraping the pavement. The effort was immense. His injured paw throbbed with every step, but Shadow pressed on. The vehicle's red lights blurred in his vision as he ran, chasing it down the winding road. When the ambulance finally stopped in front of a large building, Shadow collapsed, his breath ragged, his legs trembling. He forced himself up, his gaze fixed on the building's doors. This must be where they had taken Elliot. Shadow's instincts pushed him forward, past the confusion and exhaustion. Shadow limped through the hospital gates, his legs trembling but determined. His black fur, matted and dirty, caught the attention of patients and visitors as he barked loudly, a desperate, piercing sound that silenced the usual hum of hospital life. Some passers-by stopped, watching in confusion, while others waved him off, assuming he was a stray. But Shadow didn't stop. His eyes scanned the chaos, his nose twitching for a scent, Elliot's scent. Inside the ICU, Elliot lay motionless, his face pale under the harsh fluorescent lights. Nurses monitored his vitals, and doctors exchanged whispers about the slim chances of recovery. Then, faintly, the sound of barking reached the room. At first, no one paid it much attention, but as the barking grew more intense, something unexpected happened. The rhythmic beeping of Elliot's heart monitor began to spike. A nurse leaned in, adjusting the machine, but her eyes widened as Elliot's fingers twitched. "His pulse is increasing," one doctor murmured. "Did he just move?" The barking outside grew louder, relentless, as if commanding Elliot to wake. His eyelids fluttered, then slowly lifted. A hoarse whisper escaped his lips. "Shadow." Meanwhile, Shadow had picked up Elliot's scent, weaving through hallways, dodging wheelchairs and startled staff. He reached a glass door and, seeing Elliot inside, barked furiously. A security guard approached to pull him away, but a nurse intervened. "Wait. Let him in. I think he's here for the patient." The guard hesitated, but eventually opened the door. Shadow bolted inside. Elliot's eyes widened as Shadow leapt onto the bed. The once feeble man raised a trembling hand, placing it on Shadow's head. Tears streamed down his face as Shadow licked his hand, then his cheek. The room filled with quiet awe as the bond between man and dog became palpable. Elliot's voice, though faint, carried a conviction no one could ignore. "He found me. He saved me. Shadow. You're my brother." Word spread quickly through the hospital. Staff gathered outside the ICU, peeking through the window at the reunion. Shadow, now calmer, lay curled beside Elliot, his eyes half closed, but his ears alert. Nurses sneaked in snacks for the loyal dog, leaving bowls of water by the bed. A doctor with a fondness for animals took a picture of Shadow resting his head on Elliot's lap. He posted it to his social media account with the caption, "A dog's loyalty knows no bounds. Meet Shadow, the hero who brought his owner back to life. The post quickly went viral. Comments poured in, praising Shadow's devotion and marveling at his incredible journey. Many remarked how Shadow's story reminded them of their own pet's unconditional love. In the midst of this online frenzy, hospital staff couldn't resist coming by to offer Shadow treats and pats on the head, though his attention never wavered from Elliot. Shadow had found his place, right where he belonged. Sophia scrolled through her phone absent-mindedly when a news clip caught her eye. It was a story about a loyal dog named Shadow who had waited for weeks outside a hospital for his owner. But as the camera panned to the bedridden man, Sophia froze. The face on the screen was unmistakably her father, Elliot, the man she had been searching for nearly a decade. Without hesitation, she grabbed her keys and raced to the hospital, heart pounding. When she arrived, Elliot was lying pale on the bed, Shadow sitting protectively by his side. Tears welled up in Sophia's eyes as she stepped forward, her voice trembling. "Dad, it's me, Sophia." Elliot's tired eyes opened slightly, his expression a mix of disbelief and confusion. "I've been looking for you," she continued, "but I could never find you. I didn't know if you were still alive." As Elliot slowly recognized her, Shadow tensed beside him, watching her warily. Sophia hesitated before confessing the burden that had weighed on her for years. She apologized for abandoning him, for the choices that had torn their family apart. Her voice broke when she admitted what her family had done to Shadow. "Dad, I didn't know until it was too late. Logan and Mason. They hurt him, treated him like a toy. I'm so sorry. I know I can't undo it, but I need you to know how much I regret it." Elliot's gaze turned to Shadow, the dog who had saved him in more ways than one. The thought of him enduring such cruelty from Sophia's family pierced his heart. "Sophia," he said weakly, "this dog gave me a reason to keep going when no one else did. And now you're telling me your family, my own blood, was the cause of his suffering." His voice, though soft, carried the weight of a father's disappointment. Sophia wiped her tears, nodding solemnly. "Yes, Dad, and I hate myself for not stopping it. But there's more you need to know." She explained how her mother, Elliot's ex-wife, had taken her abroad under false pretenses. Before passing away from a terminal illness, her mother had confessed everything. How she manipulated Elliot to get custody, how she lied about needing money for their daughter's treatment to leave the country. "She told me the truth when it was too late. I couldn't fix what she broke, but I promised myself I would find you and make things right." Elliot was silent for a long moment, his hand resting on Shadow's head. "You're here now," he finally said, his voice filled with weariness. "But knowing what Shadow went through, I can't bring myself to walk back into that house. I won't risk him facing those memories again." Sophia stepped closer, her tone firm yet pleading. "I understand why you feel that way, but things will be different. I promise, Dad. Logan and Mason were kids then. They didn't know better. But I'll teach them. I'll make sure they grow up knowing what kindness and responsibility mean. I owe it to you and to Shadow." Shadow seemed to sense the sincerity in Sophia's voice. His tense posture relaxed slightly as she knelt down and looked him in the eyes. "Shadow," she whispered, "I can't undo what was done, but I promise you'll never go through that again. Please, trust me." Elliot watched the interaction, his heart caught between distrust and longing. He looked at Shadow, the dog who had been his constant companion, and then back at Sophia, his daughter, who was offering him a second chance. "All right," he said finally, though his tone was cautious. "We'll try, but only because of the promise you made. To him, not me." Shadow barked softly, as if approving the decision. Elliot and Shadow arrived at Sophia's house on a breezy afternoon. The air was warm, but the atmosphere inside felt heavy. Shadow's paws clicked softly against the hardwood floor as he cautiously scanned his new environment. His eyes darted toward Logan and Mason, who froze under his intense, wary gaze. The boys didn't dare approach. They lingered at the edge of the room, whispering to each other. Shadow's posture was tense, his tail low but stiff, signaling his discomfort. Elliot observed quietly, his hand resting protectively on Shadow's head, ready to intervene if anything went wrong. The tension lingered for days. Shadow kept his distance from the boys, retreating to a corner of the living room or lying close to Elliot's chair. Logan and Mason avoided eye contact, unsure how to break the ice with the dog they had once wronged. Their mother, Sophia, tried to encourage them, but her words fell flat. Elliot, sensing the unease, decided it was time for a lesson. He called the boys into the kitchen one evening, sitting them down at the old oak table. Elliot began with a story. He told them about Shadow's past, his suffering, and the scars, both visible and invisible, that the dog carried. His voice was steady, but carried a weight that demanded attention. Logan and Mason listened, their young faces gradually shifting from curiosity to guilt. They hadn't understood before, but Elliot made it clear. Animals, like people, feel pain. They remember kindness and cruelty. He ended by saying, "If you want Shadow to trust you, you have to earn it." The next day, Logan approached Shadow first, moving slowly and speaking softly. He offered a piece of chicken, holding it out patiently. Shadow hesitated, but eventually sniffed the boy's hand and accepted the treat. Mason watched from a distance, encouraged by his brother's success. Later, Mason mimicked Logan's approach, crouching low and calling Shadow's name gently. This time, Shadow didn't back away. Progress came in small steps, but it was progress nonetheless. Within a week, the boys were leaving little bowls of water and snacks around the house for Shadow. They began sitting near him during family movie nights, waiting for him to come closer on his own terms. Logan was the first to try petting him. His hand trembled slightly as he reached out, but Shadow didn't flinch. Mason followed, stroking the dog's back with an awkward but genuine gentleness. The tension in Shadow's body slowly melted. By the end of the week, he was wagging his tail, a small but powerful sign of trust. Elliot watched these changes with quiet pride. He saw how his lessons were taking root, not just in how the boys treated Shadow, but in their attitudes toward animals in general. One evening, Mason found a stray cat near the garage and, without hesitation, brought it food and water. Logan started asking Elliot questions about animal care, eager to learn more. Sophia noticed the shift, too. Her sons were gentler, more thoughtful, and she knew it was because of Elliot and Shadow. The family dynamic transformed. Shadow became the center of their home, a living reminder of the lessons they had learned together. He no longer watched the boys with suspicion, but instead followed them around the house, wagging his tail and accepting their affection. Even Sophia, who had been focused on mending her relationship with Elliot, found herself growing attached to the dog. She often joined her sons in feeding and walking Shadow, using those moments to bond with her father as well. By the end of the month, the house felt lighter, filled with laughter and shared moments that revolved around Shadow. For the first time in years, Elliot felt a sense of peace. Shadow had brought the family together in a way he hadn't expected. As he sat in the backyard one evening, watching Logan and Mason play fetch with Shadow, he thought about how far they had all come. Trust had been rebuilt, not just between Shadow and the boys, but within the family itself. For Elliot, it was more than enough. It was home. The morning sun spilled over the small suburban house where Sophia's family lived. The air was calm, and laughter echoed from the backyard. Shadow lay on the grass, his shiny black coat gleaming as Logan and Mason brushed it gently. The once cautious dog now wagged his tail happily, basking in the attention. After weeks of guidance from Elliot, The boys had grown into gentle caretakers. Shadow had become more than a pet. He was family. Sophia watched from the kitchen window, a warm smile spreading across her face. She had come a long way from the mother who once ignored the importance of teaching compassion. Her father, Elliot, had instilled in her a new perspective, and now it extended to her children. Logan handed Mason a treat, and together they encouraged Shadow to perform a trick. The dog's response, a perfect high five, sent the boys into fits of laughter. Shadow barked joyfully, running in circles around them. That afternoon, Sophia sat down with Elliot to discuss her newest project. Inspired by the bond she had witnessed between her father and Shadow, she wanted to create something meaningful. "I've been thinking about opening a shelter," she said, "for animals like Shadow, ones who deserve a second chance." Elliot listened quietly, nodding. "You're onto something," he said. "There are so many out there, waiting for someone to notice them." Shadow rested his head on Elliot's lap, as if agreeing. It didn't take long for Sophia to bring her vision to life. Within months, she had transformed an unused building into a warm and inviting animal rescue center. Elliot and Shadow became regular fixtures there. Elliot would tell visitors stories about his journey with Shadow, and the dog would charm everyone with his calm, gentle demeanor. The shelter soon became a hub of activity, rescuing dozens of stray and abandoned animals. Families who visited often left with not just a pet, but a sense of purpose. Elliot found a new sense of peace in his work at the shelter. After years of being lost and lonely, he was finally surrounded by love. He watched as Shadow helped timid animals gain confidence, just as the dog himself once had. Every wag of Shadow's tail felt like a reminder that redemption was possible for anyone. Elliot often reflected on how his journey had come full circle. "He saved me," he would tell people, "not the other way around." One evening, the family gathered in the backyard for a quiet dinner. The table was filled with food, laughter, and the chatter of Logan and Mason recounting their day at school. Shadow sat contentedly by Elliot's chair, his presence a comforting constant. Sophia looked around at her family, her heart full. She caught her father's eye and smiled, grateful for how far they'd come. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Elliot leaned back in his chair, Shadow's head resting on his knee. He gazed at the scene before him, the family he had thought he'd lost, now whole again. The warmth of their love enveloped him, filling every lonely corner of his past. "We did good, didn't we, buddy?" he murmured to Shadow, who thumped his tail in response. When the moon rose, casting a soft glow over the yard, Elliot closed his eyes, letting the sounds of laughter and the rustling of leaves lull him. In that moment, he knew peace. Shadow was safe. His family was safe. And for the first time in years, so was he.